Last fall, before COVID-19, I visited the library of the Novus Ordo Seminary. I was curious to see whether they would have deleted all their old books, but I was very happy to see that they had a lot of old stuff. I spent the entire day there, and I stumbled across an old translation of a German book on moral theology. It was called A Handbook of Moral Theology by Father Antony Koch. I took a lot of photos of the pages of the book, only to discover later that the text is available on a couple of sites on the internet. The book has a section on work. Though I've done a few videos on the topic of work, I can't overstress it, because the goal of this channel is to assist laymen in spiritual growth, and work is an indispensable element in a layman's spiritual growth. The importance of work seems to be somewhat forgotten nowadays, but the ancient Benedictine motto is ora et labora, or pray and work. But it truly seems that this is a stark contrast to the proposals we see in the media for a universal basic income, where every citizen would receive a flat monthly payment regardless of whether they're working or not. As Western civilization has entered into this post-Christian era, we have become very slothful. But what would a Catholic world look like? Labor is, first of all, a natural necessity. Nature compels man to labor for the necessary means of subsistence. St. Thomas Aquinas said that manual labor is directed to the removal of idleness, whence arrive many evils. While the work done by some men, such as physicians, teachers, priests, and those in the service industries, does not produce material goods, their work still may be truly productive in an immediate and indirect way because they are involved in the creation, acquisition, and preservation of things of value. In the natural economic sense, labor may be defined as the conscious and purposeful application of man's faculties with a view to producing those things which are necessary or useful for sustaining life. Since the time of Adam and Eve, labor has been a primary means of moral progress and perfection. Man's labor brings him dignity and contributes towards his sanctification. Father Koch tells us that labor should be man's very breath in life. It preserves his bodily and mental health, it steels and fortifies his will, and it makes him contented and happy. Even when the tangible products do not seem to correspond with the energy expended, the right sort of work has an intrinsic ideal value which makes it worthwhile, whereas idleness and sloth entail spiritual death, and at the same time they are a gross violation of the duty which the individual owes to society. Father Koch tells us that to toil faithfully and assiduously in one's chosen vocation is to obey a divine command. Labor spells life, idleness death. Distaste for labor has its source in repugnance to duty and involves contempt of the divine commandments, which bind society together. St. Thomas tells us that the delicate are those who cannot endure toils, nor anything that diminishes pleasure. Delicacy is a kind of effeminacy. Labor is a great blessing. Father Koch tells us that anyone who voluntarily renounces work's benefits is a fool. Honor for every kind of work. We must come, at last, to recognize that it is a sin against both culture and art for the upper classes to brand as vulgar and dishonorable whole groups of occupations which are necessary and in fact indispensable. Labor has a sacred duty which he, meaning man, owes God to himself and to his fellow man. He works for the honor and glory of God and for the sanctification of his own soul. So, labor is a vital means of developing the higher spiritual side of man's nature. Without work, it is difficult, if not impossible, for an able-bodied man to make spiritual progress. So we learn to prize and honor and love work. We know that we never labor in vain, that despite all the human weakness, misery, and imperfection, our work has a value. We know how much we owe to work, and what a benefit is a great serious life task. How work steels the will, trains the faculties, strengthens the whole man. How external labor helps us in our inner work with ourselves, promoting moral purity, mental breadth, and depth. When work is completed, we enjoy an inner peace, a pleasant fatigue. And not only do we find joy after the work, but if we learn to imitate the saints, we will learn to be joyful during our work, and even to enjoy the work itself. Work can be healing. We know from our own experience, and we see it in others, that when people face a great sorrow or a terrible crisis, they can find healing through work. The duty of labor, however, must not be urged beyond reasonable limits. A man who retires from business after years of hard work to rest and prepare for death is not to be accused of idleness. And I submit to you that traveling, taking cruises, or spending time on hobbies is not preparing for death. There are cases in which it is better for a man, especially one of advanced years, to step aside than to cling to a position for which he is no longer fit. Father Koch tells us that there are some professions that don't deserve the noble name of labor. These occupations just don't produce. They only consume and destroy, and they profit from the financial and moral ruin of men. And among these occupations he lists usury, prostitution, and gambling in futures. There is another kind of predominantly intellectual labor which is destructive and therefore worse than useless. It's the writing and publishing of books, magazines, and newspapers that attack or undermine faith and morals. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back again within a week with another one. But in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page and my Twitter page. Every day I post additional content that you won't find on this YouTube channel. And also, please pray for the church.